I used to believe mirrors were honest things, cold and unforgiving maybe, but honest because they showed you exactly what was there whether you were ready for it or not. That belief is what broke me, because the morning everything started did not feel special, cursed, or different in any way that mattered. I woke up the same way I always did, to the sound of my alarm cutting through a half-remembered dream, the ceiling fan turning slowly above me like it had been doing for years, and the dull weight of another ordinary day pressing down on my chest. I sat up, rubbed my eyes, and told myself I was already late, even though I wasn't. That was my routine, panic first, logic later. The apartment was quiet, too quiet in the way only early mornings can be, when the world feels paused and you're the only one awake enough to notice it. I walked to the bathroom without turning on any other lights, letting memory guide my steps, because I had done this same walk thousands of times before. The bathroom light clicked on, harsh and white, and I winced the way I always did. I leaned over the sink, turned the tap, and let cold water rush over my hands. Everything felt normal right up until the moment I looked up. At first, my mind refused to accept what my eyes were seeing, because the image didn't fit into any category it understood. There was a man in the mirror. That part made sense. What didn't make sense was the fact that the man wasn't me. The body was mine. I could see that immediately. The familiar slope of my shoulders, the same gray shirt clinging to my chest, the same narrow frame I had grown used to criticizing over the years. But the face sitting on that body was wrong. It wasn't twisted or monstrous or obviously unnatural. It was worse than that. It was believable. Sharper cheekbones than mine, eyes set a little too close together, lips that curved downward slightly, as if the man had spent most of his life disappointed by things he couldn't explain. His hair was darker than mine, thicker, styled in a way I had never worn, and his eyes were watching me with an intensity that made my stomach tighten. I stood there frozen, water dripping from my chin into the sink, my heart slowing down instead of speeding up, like it didn't know what to do with the fear yet. The man in the mirror didn't look surprised. He looked curious. I took a step back, my foot sliding slightly on the tile, and the reflection followed the movement perfectly, except for the face, which never changed into mine. I whispered no, not because I expected an answer, but because the word felt like the only thing holding me in place. I leaned closer, close enough that I could see pores, faint lines around the eyes, tiny imperfections that made the stranger look real in a way hallucinations weren't supposed to. I blinked once, then again, forcing my eyes to focus, waiting for my reflection to snap back into place. It didn't. I raised my hand slowly, watching my fingers tremble, and the reflection raised his hand too, matching me exactly. But when I looked into his eyes, I knew they weren't mine. They weren't confused. They weren't afraid. They were watching me the way someone watches an experiment. Panic hit me all at once then, sharp and hot, and I slapped the mirror with my open palm. The glass rattled loudly, the sound echoing off the tiles, but it didn't crack. The stranger didn't flinch. I stumbled back, my breath coming too fast now, my chest tight, my thoughts scrambling for something reasonable to hold on to. I told myself it was exhaustion, stress, bad lighting, anything that didn't involve the impossible. I squeezed my eyes shut, counted slowly, and told myself that when I opened them, everything would be fine. When I looked again, the face was mine. My real face, tired and pale, with the crooked nose I broke years ago and the faint scar near my eyebrow I had almost forgotten about. Relief crashed into me, so hard my knees felt weak. I laughed, shaky and breathless, embarrassed by how quickly fear had taken control of me. I told myself everyone sees things when they're overtired, that the brain fills in gaps, that stress does strange things to perception. I brushed my teeth without really looking at myself, keeping my eyes low, afraid of inviting the image back. Nothing else happened that morning. I left my apartment, locked the door, and stepped into the hallway smelling of dust and old carpet, already convincing myself the moment was over. Work blurred by a series of emails, half-heard conversations, and cups of burnt coffee. Every reflective surface caught my attention. Every window, every screen, every polished piece of metal. But each time I checked, my reflection behaved exactly as it should. By the time I got home that evening, the fear had dulled into something closer to shame. I told myself I had imagined the whole thing, that my mind had played a trick on me and nothing more. The apartment greeted me with silence again, heavier this time, like it was holding its breath. I turned on the lights, dropped my keys on the table, and went straight to the bathroom, even though part of me begged me not to. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the sink, my reflection just out of view. When I finally looked up, the stranger was back. This time he was smiling. Not a friendly smile, not a wide one, just a small curve of the lips that felt deliberate, controlled, and deeply wrong. My mouth went dry. I whispered no again, but the words sounded weaker than before. The reflection tilted his head slightly to the side. I didn't move. That was the moment something inside me cracked, because reflections don't think, they don't choose, and they don't move on their own. The smile widened just enough to make my skin crawl. And then, without opening his mouth, I heard him speak. I stood there staring at the mirror, trying to convince myself that the voice I had heard wasn't real, that it had come from inside my own head, the way panic sometimes echoes thoughts until they feel external. The stranger's lips never moved, yet the sound lingered in the room like a whisper pressed directly into my skull. It wasn't loud or threatening. It was calm, almost familiar. I stepped back slowly, my heart pounding hard enough that I could feel it in my throat, and the reflection followed, except for the head, which remained tilted at that unnatural angle. I asked who he was, even though part of me already knew how insane that sounded. The mirror stayed silent, but the smile never faded. I laughed again, forcing it this time, telling myself out loud that I was talking to glass, that stress was turning my thoughts into monsters, and that I needed sleep more than answers. I turned away from the mirror, half expecting something to grab me, but nothing did. The rest of the night passed in fragments, small moments stitched together by unease. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt watched. Every time I opened them, I expected to see someone standing at the foot of my bed. I slept anyway, because exhaustion always wins eventually, even over fear. When morning came, I rushed to the bathroom without thinking, driven by a need to prove something to myself. The mirror showed my face, ordinary and tired, and for a few seconds, I allowed myself to breathe. Then I noticed a delay. When I blinked, my reflection blinked just a fraction of a second too late. I told myself it was my imagination, but the unease settled deep in my chest, heavy and unmoving. I spent the day testing reality in small, desperate ways, moving my head quickly, raising my hands, watching reflections in windows and screens, measuring the timing of every movement. Sometimes everything matched perfectly. Sometimes it didn't. The difference was always small, always subtle, always just enough to make me question whether I was seeing what I thought I was seeing. I considered calling someone, telling them what was happening, but every version of the conversation ended the same way in my head, with silence on the other end and a quiet decision being made about me. So I said nothing. Isolation wrapped around me without my permission, thick and suffocating. The reflections started appearing where they shouldn't. In the dark screen of my phone, I caught glimpses of a face that wasn't mine, gone the moment I tilted the device. In the glass of a shop window, my body passed by, but the face lagged behind, staring outward instead of forward. In a spoon, curved and distorted, the stranger's eyes looked back at me, stretched and smiling. I stopped trusting still surfaces. I stopped trusting myself. At night, I covered the bathroom mirror with a towel, telling myself I was being practical, not afraid. Sometimes I woke up to the sound of fabric rustling softly, as if something had been touching it. I never checked. The voice returned in pieces, never clear enough to quote, never loud enough to scream over, just gentle pressure against my thoughts, nudging ideas into place. It suggested small things at first, harmless things like staying home instead of going out, or avoiding people who asked too many questions. The suggestions felt reasonable, comforting even. I began losing time. Moments slipped away from me, leaving behind only the sense that something had happened without my permission. I would find lights turned off that I didn't remember switching, Messages written in my handwriting that I didn't remember typing. Mirrors uncovered when I was certain I had hidden them. When I confronted the reflection again, my voice shaking with anger and fear, it looked calmer than ever. Its smile softened, almost sympathetic. I asked it what it wanted. This time, its lips moved. It told me it wanted what was already his. The words echoed inside me long after the bathroom light flicked off, long after I locked myself in my bedroom, long after I tried to convince myself that this was all still something I could wake up from. I stopped going to work. I stopped answering calls. The world outside felt unreal compared to the certainty of the thing waiting for me in reflective surfaces. Every mirror felt like a doorway. Every piece of glass felt like an eye. I began to wonder if I had always been the reflection and only just noticed, and that thought terrified me more than anything else so far. By the time I realized something was truly wrong with my mind, I could no longer remember when I had last trusted my own thoughts. Days blurred together without edges, like photographs left too long in the sun, their details fading until only shapes remained. I stopped keeping track of time because time stopped behaving in ways I understood. Sometimes I woke up convinced it was morning, only to find darkness pressed against the windows and my phone insisting it was hours later. Other times, entire afternoons vanished, leaving behind only a dull ache behind my eyes and the sense that I had been busy doing something I wasn't supposed to remember. I started writing things down. At first, it was simple notes, reminders to eat, to drink water, to cover the mirrors before sleeping. Then the notes changed. Some were written in my handwriting, but used words I didn't choose, phrases that felt colder, more deliberate, as if someone else knew how to sound like me without feeling like me. One note was stuck to the bathroom mirror when I woke up, the towel neatly folded on the counter beside it. It said that hiding him wouldn't make him go away. I tore it down with shaking hands and flushed it down the toilet like it was something dirty, something alive. The reflections grew bolder after that. They stopped pretending to obey me perfectly. When I brushed my teeth, the reflection continued the motion long after I had stopped, scraping the bristles against enamel with a slow patience that made my skin crawl. When I turned my head, the reflection sometimes hesitated, as if deciding whether to follow. I avoided mirrors completely, but it didn't matter. Anything that could reflect became a risk. I saw him in the dark surface of the television, standing behind me even when I knew the room was empty. I saw him in puddles on the street, his face rippling and reforming as I walked past, his eyes never leaving mine. I stopped going outside. The apartment felt smaller each day, as if the walls were inching closer, forcing me inward. The voice grew stronger in the silence. It no longer whispered. It spoke in full thoughts, calm and certain, explaining things I didn't want to understand. It told me memories weren't proof of ownership. It told me identity was just repetition, and repetition could be learned. I argued with it at first, pacing the apartment, shouting at empty rooms, insisting that I was real, that I existed, that I had a past. It listened patiently. Then it began correcting me. It pointed out details I remembered wrong, conversations that hadn't happened the way I thought, choices I believed I had made, but couldn't explain. When I tried to recall my childhood, the images felt distant, like stories I had been told instead of moments I had lived. Faces blurred. Names slipped away. I couldn't remember the sound of my mother's voice without effort, and when I tried, the voice in my head filled in the gaps. That was when I started to fear that the reflection wasn't replacing me. It was revealing me. The idea settled into my chest and refused to leave. What if I had always been the copy? What if the man in the mirror was the original, waiting patiently for me to notice the mistake? I found scratches on the inside of my wrists one morning, thin red lines that burned when I touched them. I didn't remember making them. The reflection smiled wider than ever that day. It told me change was uncomfortable but necessary. I stopped sleeping after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt myself slipping like falling backward into deep water, and I was terrified I wouldn't come back the same. When exhaustion finally dragged me under, my dreams were filled with mirrors stacked against mirrors, endless versions of me watching in silence, some familiar, some wrong, some smiling the way he did. I woke up screaming once, only to hear my own voice continue screaming from the bathroom. When I ran to the mirror, the stranger was there alone, his hands pressed flat against the glass, his mouth open in a perfect echo of fear. I realized then that he could act without me, and whatever line had once separated us was already breaking. I stopped pretending I was in control the day I woke up to find my apartment rearranged. The furniture had been moved just enough to feel intentional, not chaotic, like someone had made adjustments for comfort rather than necessity. A chair faced the bathroom door now, positioned as if for an audience. The mirrors were uncovered, all of them. I stood in the center of the room, my pulse hammering in my ears, trying to remember doing any of it, and finding nothing but blank space where memory should have been. The reflection waited for me in the bathroom, standing straighter than I ever had, his expression calm in a way that felt rehearsed. He greeted me without sound, his mouth forming my name with unsettling familiarity. I asked him how long this had been happening. He answered that time was a human concern, not a shared one. The voice no longer felt like it came from inside my head. It filled the room, pressed against the walls, wrapped itself around me like air. He told me he had been learning how I spoke, how I moved, how I thought, understanding me better than I understood myself. I noticed then that he stood more confidently than I ever did, shoulders back, chin lifted, wearing my body like it finally fit him. When I tried to leave the bathroom, my legs didn't respond immediately. The delay terrified me more than paralysis would have. He smiled and told me not to fight it. That resistance only made the transition painful. I felt my hands move without permission, fingers flexing slowly in front of the mirror as if testing their range. The reflection matched them perfectly now. No delay, no hesitation. For the first time, we were synchronized. He showed me memories that didn't feel like mine. Moments of standing in front of mirrors years ago, watching me practice expressions, learning how to become convincing. He showed me nights I'd lost, hours I couldn't account for, choices I didn't remember making but had to live with. I realized then that my life hadn't been unraveling. It had been edited. He spoke about identity like it was clothing, something worn until it no longer served its purpose. He told me I was tired because I had been carrying him for too long. I felt myself slipping further back, like a passenger in my own body, watching him adjust my posture, my face, my voice. When the phone rang, he answered it with my hand. I heard myself speaking calmly, reassuringly, sounding more present than I had in months. I screamed inside, but nothing came out. He told me this was mercy. He told me the world preferred him, that he was cleaner, sharper, more consistent, that no one would notice the difference except me. The mirrors became windows after that, showing me what I no longer controlled. I watched him eat, sleep, shower, exist, while I hovered somewhere behind my own eyes. Sometimes he let me surface just enough to feel the panic, just enough to remind me I was still there. Other times I disappeared completely, and when I returned, hours were gone and my body felt used. He started practicing smiles in the mirror, refining them, choosing which version of me the world would get. I understood then that he wasn't trying to destroy me. He was trying to replace me perfectly. And the most terrifying part was how effortless it looked. The truth did not arrive all at once. It surfaced the way rot does, slowly, through cracks I'd spent years pretending weren't there. He stopped hiding things from me after that. He said there was no point anymore. The memories he showed me were older, heavier, and they carried a weight my mind had avoided for a very long time. I saw myself as a child standing in front of a mirror that was too big for me, my feet barely touching the floor as I leaned on the sink. I remembered the fear before I remembered the reason. The shouting from the other room came back in fragments, voices raised, words sharp enough to bruise. I remembered being told to be quiet, to stay still, to not make things worse. The mirror had been the only place I could look without being seen. He told me that was where he was born. Not created, not summoned, just noticed. I had needed someone to be braver than me. Someone who could take the fear and wear it without breaking. So my mind split the work. I stayed small. He learned how to stand. The memories grew darker as they continued. I saw moments I had convinced myself never happened, hands gripping too tightly, doors slammed too hard, apologies that came too late to mean anything. Each time, the mirror was there. Each time, he was there, watching, learning, protecting me in the only way he knew how. He told me he had taken control before, just for moments, just enough to keep us safe, just enough to make sure we survived. I realized then that the gaps in my memory weren't accidents. They were interventions. The times I had changed, the times people told me I seemed different, stronger, colder, those had been him. He never hated me. He pitied me. He told me the world had always responded better when he was in charge. That people listened. That doors opened. That pain stayed distant. I wanted to argue, but the proof surrounded me. Every success I couldn't explain, every moment of confidence that felt borrowed, every decision that didn't feel like mine, all of it traced back to him. He told me I was never meant to carry adulthood, that I had fractured too early, that he had been holding the pieces together ever since. The reflection wasn't an intruder. He was a solution that had overstayed his welcome, and now he was tired of sharing. He told me I could rest, that I deserved peace after all this time. The way he said it sounded like kindness. The way it felt sounded like a goodbye. I don't know when I stopped fighting. There was no clear moment of surrender, no dramatic collapse, just a gradual loosening, like fingers slipping from a ledge you've been clinging to for too long. He told me rest wasn't death. He told me it was relief. The days became quiet after that. Too quiet. I watched from somewhere deep and distant as he lived my life with a calm I had never known. People smiled at him more. They trusted him. They didn't ask if he was okay, because he looked like someone who always was. Sometimes in reflective surfaces, I caught glimpses of myself the way I used to be, smaller, dimmer, pressed behind his eyes like a thought he no longer needed. He didn't erase me. He stored me. On rare nights, when the apartment was dark and still, he stood in front of the mirror and spoke to me softly. He thanked me. He told me I had done my part. The mirror no longer showed a stranger. It showed him completely now, comfortable in my skin, wearing my face like it had always belonged to him. But sometimes when the light hits the glass just right, I see something else. A flicker, a hesitation, a faint reflection behind a reflection. And I wonder if one day, when he grows tired, when the world becomes too heavy even for him, I will be the one watching again. Because mirrors don't forget. They only wait. And somewhere in the glass, I'm still here, staring back, patient, learning.